putting the S
Recording in progress.
in ESG, prioritizing children in social responsibility. And the third part will be Business-ECD partnerships in action, sharing some success stories. For those of you just joining us, some housekeeping notes that this session is being recorded and will be shared with our participants. The Q&A feature is there for you to drop questions in, and we'll be taking questions from the audience as time allows. Any questions that aren't answered, we will be able to be doing some follow-up post-event and sharing answers to the most frequently asked questions. We also will be planning a reflection session for our participants in the future. We'll be announcing that post-event. And we do plan on playing the recording in full to be able to expand our reach for this important topic across multiple time zones. So this session is entitled Building Partnerships with Businesses, Laying the Foundation. And for those of you who weren't with us in the previous part, I'm going to turn the floor over again to Dr. Sarah Watson, who's the director of the Center for Business Champions, a new initiative of Childhood Education International. Dr. Watson, she's been wonderful to work with. She has great experience and knowledge in this space. She founded and was the global director of Ready Nation and Ready Nation International, where she designed, fundraised, and led the joint organization for 14 years. She has a lot of hands-on experience, just some wonderful insights that she's been sharing with us through the day and will continue to do that. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sarah.
Thank you so much. And we're so glad that many of you could join us either today or through the recording. We had more than 500 people register from more than 100 countries, which I think shows you the level of interest that people have in working collaboratively between business and the ECD sector to improve outcomes for children and their families. The unique goal of the Center for Business Champions, as I've said, is to give you practical help in engaging your business community to achieve your goals. And we're going to start moving in that direction in the next part of the program. So I'll talk for a few minutes about what ECD leaders need to know and building the foundation to work with business. The previous program, we had wonderful presentations on the economic data that exists that leaders can use to engage business. And then we'll talk about kind of moving on to the next steps as you assemble your evidence base. And then I'm thrilled to have Marlene Legert. I hope I said that right, but she's going to correct me when she starts if her coaching wasn't enough for me to talk about the wide variety of actions that business leaders can take to support young children and their families. Marlene is the director of the Center for Child Rights and Businesses Global Consultancy Services, where she has 20 years of international work experience across pretty much all continents, except maybe Antarctica, I would say, in building these partnerships to, at the very minimum, build up the floor of protecting child rights, and then moving beyond that to help businesses take more proactive actions to support young children, which is supporting their employees and their communities as well as their economic success into the future. Could you go to my slides, and I'll spend a few minutes doing that and then turn to Marlene. Okay, you can go to the next slide. Yep. So we want to start helping you lay the foundation for building a partnership with business in whatever format that looks like to you. I'm going to talk quickly about what we mean by a business partnership, talk about developing mutual goals, how do you bridge the business social sector culture gap and developing an action plan. Go to the next slide. So what do we mean by a business partnership? Often when I talk about that, at first people think that we are talking about building childcare centers or programs. And while all of those organizations need to think like a business in that they have revenues, they have expenses, so they need to be a sustainable program. But what we're talking about in this context with the Center for Business Champions is building partnerships with businesses that don't do direct children's services. Certainly, there are wonderful examples of social entrepreneurship that we'll talk about. So businesses that are providing services and or products that are aligned with children that can sometimes be those unexpected champions. But in general, we're talking more about businesses like Patagonia that are outside the children's sector. The other important part of our phrase is partnership. Often I have seen leaders in the children's community who feel like they need to go to business and ask them for resources to solve the problem of the children's organization. And so they are in a subordinate position compared to the business. And what we want to help early childhood leaders build is a sense of them as collaborative partners that are achieving mutual goals. You are bringing assets to the table to encourage business leaders to work with you to solve a problem that is important to both of you. And so the more we can think about this as a collaborative venture to solve a mutual problem, I think the stronger the partnership will be. Also, when we say business partnership, there are many options for structures. You've seen a couple of examples from the UK and Ready Nation. You'll see more examples later on from Kenya, from Brazil, from Mexico. And so there are many different options for this relationship with business. So we want you to think broadly about what your relationship could be. You can have relationship with individuals or whole companies. There are individual business leaders that can help you, and sometimes you want all of a company's assets. They can also take many different actions. Of course, we could see from the chat and the questions, everybody is worried about resources for very good reason, but we also need to think broadly about what businesses can do. And as I mentioned before, when we're thinking about a partnership, we want to build on the fundamentals like no child labor, preventing child violence or child abuse, and then move on to more positive goals in terms of, for example, developing family-friendly practices. So that's what we mean by a business partnership. It can be very broad based on what you need. So the next slide. So one of the things that I mentioned is it's important to think about joint business ECD goals. So those are both short-term goals and longer-term goals. There are ones that apply to both of you: child well-being, older children who don't have to sacrifice their education to care for younger siblings, productive working parents now, as well as in the future, education levels, future adults who can be good employees, job creators, customers, and neighbors, and make your community, your country a desirable place for working families, including both encouraging families to stay in the countries where they grow up, as well as encouraging families to move there. So go on to the next slide. So one of the things that I think is really important is hearing from examples of countries and organizations around the world that are developing these very important partnerships with business. And very excited that in a little while today you'll hear from the director of the Kenya Private Sector Alliance Foundation, who's going to talk about the partnerships that they've developed with business. And this is a wonderful quote from a car company that they work with. Companies that are not doing this are missing a great opportunity to increase the engagement of their employees at the workforce. We heard previously about that being a mutual goal, that companies want their employees to feel loyal and dedicated to the company. And they've developed a very groundbreaking initiative to encourage breastfeeding in the companies that are members of the KEPSA Foundation. So go on to the next slide. So one of the most important aspects of learning to work with business is bridging the business social sector culture gap. Now, we're very familiar with different countries have different cultures, and in general, the business and social sectors often also have their own professional cultures. Now, these are modified by the cultures of their countries, absolutely true. But in general, again, I've worked with people in countries also on every continent except Antarctica. And I would say there are some general differences that are really important for ECD leaders to bear in mind. So the first one, you can go ahead and do the next line, is the speed at which they operate. Business tends to be oriented towards quicker, more goal-oriented interactions. It may feel rude as an early childhood leader to ask them for what you want in your first meeting, whereas in a business leader, they often think that makes them feel more comfortable if they know why you're meeting and what it is that you want to accomplish. So next one. The time pressure. Business leaders are constantly battling a number of different issues and challenges that they need to run their business. And so the amount of time they have to think about something that isn't business related is very small. And people in the early childhood world tend to think, rightly, that ECD is so complicated. We need to tell them all of the issues and research and details, when in fact they easily get overwhelmed. And so they just want to know what they need to know to have the current conversation or address the current problem. Next one. And then metrics. We love to tell stories, and stories are important. We love to tell stories of children and families, and they are important. But we have the advantage of being able to lead with data and give them facts and evidence about the relationship between ECD and the impacts on their companies, on their communities, and their nations. So the more you can build data and evidence into your argument, the more you will stand out when you try and build this relationship with them. And one of the things that the center will be doing, you'll hear about this later on, is a training institute for ECD leaders that will go into this type of culture gap in much more detail. So go on to the next slide. And so the last thing I wanted to mention before I'm very excited to hear from Marlene is, as you've heard, it's important to have a wide array of actions for businesses to take. Small businesses, large businesses, ones that are ready to jump in, they get it, they want to take some specific action, and ones that are a little more hesitant, they want to know something small and specific that they can do. So we developed this brief. There's a link in the chat that gives a framework for thinking about the wide variety of business actions that they can take to help advance your and their ECD goals, as well as some examples, including examples from the wonderful organizations that you've heard from today. So there is direct investment. We know that people are concerned with that, but there's so much more. We want them to be public policy advocates, to be champions for government involvement and investment in early childhood. They can produce products and services that help support healthy child and parent development and also make money at the same time. We want them to incorporate this into their CSR and ESG work and measure their sustainability in terms of their work in ECD. We want to look at their company practices, their family-friendly practices that support ECD, and their engagement in the community and using their communications channels to get the message out about the importance of early childhood. One company that I worked with was a gasoline station company, and their gasoline pumps had these little video screens on top of the pumps where people would stand and look at the screens while they're filling their gas tanks because they have nothing else to do. And so we got them to put in videos about parenting and healthy child development as a way of using their own communications channels to get out the message on the importance of early childhood. So I'm really excited to turn it over to Malin and talk about her exciting work at the Center for Child Rights in Business across the world to engage business in supporting young children and their working parents. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah, for handing over to me. I'm Malin, as Sarah rightly said, and I'm going to share my screen. So I'm just doing that now. And thank you also to the organizers for having me on today's exciting conference. My name is Malin Liljert. I am, as Sarah said, the director for consultancy services at the Center for Child Rights and Business. And I'm going to talk a little bit about who we are, what we do, and how we are tackling sort of early childhood challenges that parents are facing, and that also then impacts the way businesses are doing their business operations. So I hope I can inspire you with some pictures. All of the pictures that you will see today are from the various sort of child-friendly spaces that we have set up with businesses across mainly Asia. So a little bit, you have probably not heard about us. We are a non-for-profit social enterprise. We were established in China 2010. So we are turning 15 years old this year. I could perhaps say that we are a little bit of sometimes a messy teenager. We are doing things that very few companies or organizations have done before, because we work directly with the business community. So we don't do philanthropic projects. We work directly with businesses and trying to get the businesses to support, enhance, and respect child rights in their business operations. It's not super easy, but we can do it. And I'll show you some examples on how we have done it. As you can see, we started off in China. We have grown over the 15 years. We have now 60 staff. When I started off in China 13 years ago, we were 5 people around an office table in Beijing. And here I am now based in New York, the United States. So a few more just numbers so you know a little bit on what we are doing and who we are targeting. So we are targeting workers in supply chains mainly. We also do a lot of trainings and advocacy building and policy development with corporate brands and HR staffs and so forth. But the core people that we serve are the workers in global supply chains and their children. So here are the numbers over the last 6 years, how many have benefited. And we specifically target parents, because when you talk about child rights in business, companies say that, yeah, but I mean, we don't have any child labor. So for us, that's the end thing, right? We don't deal with children, but we might sell some products to them. And then we talk to the companies and say, hey, but who are your workers? Who are in your supply chain? Aren't they parents? They are not only just workers, they are also parents. So we do a lot of parenting trainings. That was something that we started off with in China that has now been expanded to other markets as well. So that's one of our core business offerings. We do also, as the Kenyan company that you will hear from later on, we do address the issue of breastfeeding, lactation rooms, and all of this we put together under an umbrella that we are calling We Care, which is something that we implement in factories and facilities and farms across the globe. We also work on child labor. That is for another webinar, but we can clearly see that the child-friendly spaces that we are establishing is also a response to mitigating child labor risks. Many companies that we work with, they come back to us because they see that the very low threshold solutions and projects that we are implementing together are actually benefiting them and their workers in many different ways. So we are quite proud of the journey that we have done so far, the first 15 years. Let's see what the next 15 years hold and how we will mature. So we have set up, and you will see the numbers, together with businesses, again, in their business facilities, not on the production floor, of course, but in sort of their sphere, within their parameters, 104 over the years, child-friendly spaces. And this is a picture from one. And this is, you can call it the business-driven early childhood development solution that we at the center have. We have taken bits and pieces from various sort of early childhood guidelines and guidebooks, and we have also merged that with some temporary shelters that are being set up in refugee camps and so forth, to try to find a model which works for the business community and which works for suppliers. So that is a little bit what I'm going to present here today. So first of all, what is a child-friendly space there? They came about probably around, I would say 10 years ago in China, when we had calls from companies calling us during the summer holiday and saying that, hey, we have a problem because we have just had auditors in the supply chain and we have kids running around in the factory. They are not necessarily working, but they are running around playing tag on the production floor. What can we do? And we said, well, can you try to take them out of the production floor? Can you keep them in the office for the time being and you know, bring some stuff so they can draw or watch something meanwhile the parents are finishing their work, and then we will have to find a long-term solution. So it was companies calling us saying that we see that we have a need for a childcare solution, because these kids, and this was done in China, are usually living with the grandparents during the school terms. Then they want to come and see the parents that are working in different city, so they want to be reunited with them. And here they are, no childcare. So we started to work with a few companies on this. And as I mentioned before, we tried to make this a solution that fits the businesses. So it's not a school. You cannot call it a preschool, but it has, of course, some ECD elements, and the teachers are being trained on early childhood development. But here, I think, is also where one has to be very pragmatic, because setting up a school is something that very few companies would like to do, or setting up a proper childcare center is also something that companies don't want to take responsibility for. But this is somehow a mix where they feel that, okay, this is a safe place. This is, I will say good enough, but I hope that you understand what I mean. That is, it's not a bad thing. It's a really good thing for the kids, but it's not something where you have something running with teachers all year round. But we have a set process which is also aiming for making this a sustainable solution, and that is what we see is one of the big benefits of this, because when we have done the training of staff, the training of HR managers and so forth at the facility, and help them how to design the place and activities and what to do, then the factories can run this by themselves. So they are reopening this year after year after year. So many of the 104 that have been opened are still continuing. And we get some reports from them. Our staff that is in Vietnam, China, Indonesia, and Bangladesh sometimes visit them when they are out doing other factory visits, and see that this is still going on. So I think that is really a testimonial to that this kind of approach works. So you can see that there has been quite a lot of children accommodated in these child-friendly spaces during the summer. Many of them also stay open during the year and function then as an after-school center, because we know that that is also a challenge for many parents to have a functioning sort of childcare option when school is finishing. We do, as Sarah said, one important thing is to measure and to collect data, because that's something that companies want to see when they present this in their annual reports. And of course, for us also to show that this is not only a benefit for the kids and the parents, but it also impacts your business in a positive way. So you can see the numbers here. I'm just trying to remove this. We can see that, for example, worry about their kids and their situation is a big thing for parents that are either leaving their children locked in the dorms, or leaving them without very systematic supervision, or leaving them with older siblings during this summer holiday. So many of them felt that with this solution of the child-friendly space, they were less worried about their children at work. Another thing, which I think is one of the very positive things, is that workers feel understood by factory management. And many of them, when we meet them, they say that for the first time in their entire work life, they have been addressed as parent, not only as a worker, that's somehow indispensable, but as a parent. And then start to realize that the other workers are also parents, and they start chatting about their kids. They are more happy with the workplace, and they plan to stay for more years. And that is one of the big sort of benefits with this, that is reduce the retention. Workers come back when they have been home for the longer breaks around the Lunar New Year, for example. They come back to this facility because they know that this facility is caring about them and their children. So why should then companies, if we try to sort of narrow down, we have seen a lot of numbers, we've seen some photos, why should actually business invest in this? So here we distinguish between businesses and suppliers, because we as the center, we usually target, let's call it target, the businesses that have supply chains. Then the child-friendly space is set up in the supply chain. So we work, for example, with Under Armour, with IKEA, with the Otto Group, with a range of international brands that are funding this for their supply chain. They usually share the costs a bit. So the businesses are paying for our services when we come in as consultants to help them set up the space. Meanwhile, the suppliers, of course, they have the space in the facility. They do the renovation, they buy the books, the toys. They also invest in the workers' free time, because we always have a family day during the summer period, for example, where they let the workers come and have fun together with the kids. So it is a cost-sharing model here. So responsible businesses can really engage with the supply chain in a very responsible way by supporting them doing these kind of initiatives. So it's also that they are taking a little bit of the cost. So not only that the suppliers are bearing all the costs. So you can see that a little bit what I talked about, the benefits are this with increased retention, improved workplace satisfaction, efficiency, all of those KPIs. And on the business side, it's also more from a compliance risk when it comes to child labor, but it's also strengthening the engagement with their suppliers. And also to showcase, I mean, we send these reports with these pictures to the brands and the suppliers. And of course, that's nice to show to the consumers and to your clients that this is something that we are funding and that we are investing in. Everyone loves those pictures with the happy kids and the happy workers, right? It's again, alluding to what Sarah just said. They don't want to hear all the sad stories all the time. They also want to show some concrete positive results. So how to get companies on board then, because this is also what we are talking about today, right? So it can really, first of all, if you're doing these kind of direct sort of investments, let's call it like that, with businesses, you need also to find out what kind of issues are we going to tackle here. And we can see that there are a lot of issues that companies are raising where actually childcare can be, and supporting childcare can be one of the solutions. Here in the United States, when I travel, I'm currently in Virginia actually, people talk about childcare deserts. That's a big thing, right? In Asia, we talk about retention. We talk about worker well-being. We talk about production. All of these things you can address to a certain extent. Of course, childcare deserts really, but otherwise also retention with investing in the workers and in their children. But what is important to do, and I think what we have done here, is to create really low-cost, low-threshold solutions, which is manageable for businesses. And also that they need to be in line with the local regulation. So you can't, for example, in China, a factory cannot run a school. So it has to be registered as a worker benefit, for example, and then it's totally fine. So this is not something that is hidden from the local authorities. It's something that is being encouraged by them. Then we always train factory managers and HR staff so they feel that they feel engaged and that we have their buy-in for the businesses. And then usually what the supplier is doing, that they are hiring teachers during the summer holiday to be staffing and manning the childcare, the CFS, or sometimes they take university students that are studying for an ECD degree and hire them to work in the child-friendly spaces. And I think be pragmatic, right? I think this is important to remember, that this can be a bit of a stretch for companies to do. So that's why we need to adapt the solution so it fits with them. Our trainings that we run for companies is 3 days, and then we have a follow-up training. And there we do go through everything from early childhood development, key issues around child protection, but also a lot of what kind of activities should you do and what should you do when you take the kids, for example, if they eat in the canteen, all the security issues, because this is, of course, a big thing. So you can do it. It is possible. I think this is something that most workers don't expect their companies to do. This is a testimonial from a woman in a facility in Vietnam. And as you can see, that this was not something that they thought was going to happen, but they feel very grateful for their employer. Most of them want to stay longer. They see the benefits with the kids. I could talk a lot about all the stories that we hear from the kids that have maybe for the first time also stayed with the parents during a summer break, for the whole summer break, and been at their place of work or very close by and had a lot of fun in doing activities. This is what I wanted to run through. I hope I didn't go over too much. I think we have a few more minutes. If there is anything in the chat that I can respond to, I'm super happy to do that.
Thank you. That's a wonderful presentation. Your organization is doing amazing work literally across the world. There was one question in the chat that I have thought some thoughts on, but would love to hear you, is to how can leaders engage smaller businesses in particular in supporting early childhood?
Yeah, I know the issue around smaller businesses is coming up everywhere. Also, when you discuss child labor, when you discuss everything, and everyone thinks that it's only for the big businesses. But we can see that smaller businesses, it might not be easy for them to set up something in their facility. It all depends what kind of production they do have. But they also can sometimes get together, because that is the thing that we hear from brands very often. Some brands are a little bit hesitant and say, yeah, we would like to have a child-friendly space, but we are not sure if we can do it. Can we come together with some other brands? Because we might be producing or buying from the same suppliers. But that is usually a little bit challenging to have Under Armour and Nike, for example, to put it to share the same child-friendly space. We have so far not managed that. But I think for smaller businesses, there you have a business opportunities to collaborate. And you might not be able to do it in your own sort of facility, but you might be able to do it in the community or support your workers with vouchers so they can send their kids there, or provide investment for an early childhood development facility in the community. So there are ways, but it's again, not one size doesn't fit all, but it's always very exciting with the issue of small businesses. And I must say that family-owned businesses, what I see here in the United States specifically, are really keen on worker well-being and caring for their employees. And they are the ones, because I hear childcare solutions being discussed now in the United States due to this issue with lack of childcare. So, and I think those that we will see first really investing in this will be the family-owned businesses.
One of the topics that we'll address in the longer training institute that the Center for Business Champions will offer is, how do you find among the huge business world out there, how do you find the ones that are more likely to be responsive to you? Because some of them just aren't, and some of them are more likely to be responsive. And one of the things that we talk about is family-owned businesses, because they often care about their reputation in the community. They care about their long-term viability of the company. They got it from their parents. Maybe they want to pass it on. And they might know their employees better. So that is a great place to start. A couple of other thoughts on the smaller businesses. In terms of public policy advocacy, we often think about the big companies in any country having the most influence, but sometimes politicians want to hear from the smaller businesses who live in their areas about what they are experiencing. And I certainly had this experience in the United States where a very small chamber of commerce, a small town in the middle part of the country, and they thought, what can we do? And I said, well, your member of Congress wants to hear from you. They don't really care about hearing from some big company headquartered in California. They want to hear from you about how important this is to you. Small businesses can also be sources of volunteers doing projects in the community where they live. There are a lot of family-friendly practices that don't require a huge human resources staff, don't require a lot of resources. You'll hear about some really innovative work on breastfeeding in Kenya, and finding a spot for someone to be able to breastfeed, a private, clean spot for someone to be able to pump, as well as being able to take breaks, is something that small businesses can manage as well as larger businesses, as well as giving information to parents about how their child should be developing, what to look for, etc. So Marlene, that was wonderful. I admire your work so much. We were thrilled that you could spend some time with us. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. It was my pleasure to join you. Thank you so much.
Great. So some takeaways from our session is that partnerships can advance mutual goals with the ECD sector. We do need to bridge the culture gap. Marlene could probably have talked for hours about how she works with businesses and how she adapts and thinks about their culture. Just the front page of their website talks about supporting business and children. The fact that she has this very collaborative approach with business that says, you have a business problem, we have a solution, is something that I think makes businesses really want to work with her. They have a number of innovative solutions. They didn't come in with one, approach, but really listened to what the business challenge was and developed a solution. I think that's why that makes them so successful. And she talked about specific business benefits, ways in which this initiative brings tangible benefits in terms of employees being more productive, more loyal to the company, happier to be there, etc. So thank you again. And I'm going to turn it over to Yvette to take us to our next section.
Thanks so much, Sarah. Thanks so much, Malin, for such a wonderful practical session. Really being able to speak to all different types of contexts that are trying to really participate in this space. So in our next session, so the next session is going to start in about 5 minutes. And we look forward to putting the S in ESG, prioritizing children and social responsibility, with our panelists, Michael Karen, Nina Vollmer, and Rashonda Perriman. Please, in the next 5 minutes, check out the program, get familiar with what's upcoming, and we'll get started with it shortly as we get our panelists settled in. Thanks so much.